I have to believe that the stark juxtaposition between the soaring heights of his early years and the depths to which he would fall in the subsequent ones was not lost on Joseph. Joseph, the first and favorite child of Jacob's beloved wife Rachel, the recipient of Jacob's doting affections and coveted coat of many colors, Joseph had every reason to look forward to a life of privilege and purpose. As a young man, not once but twice, he dreamed a little dream predicting an auspicious future for himself, an altogether starry future with him at the center. So when Joseph was flung into the pit by his brothers, sold into slavery to Egypt, falsely accused by his master's wife, and then cast into jail, I have to imagine that on more than one occasion, Joseph wondered to himself something to the effect of, really? For this, I was put on this earth? How on earth is it possible that I, Joseph, heir to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, have been brought so very low, a man chosen from amongst the chosen, now separated from my beloved father and all that is dear, and even worse, faded to obscurity? We know, because the narrator tells us, and because we've seen the musical, that God was with Joseph, that everything would turn out okay. But Joseph didn't know that. He was unaware of how the story would turn. Cast down from the high perch upon which his life began, poor Joseph had fallen very far. An empty, purposeless existence, a life whose mission was obscured from all, worst of all, from himself. All of which makes it so very remarkable to hear what Joseph says to his brothers in the denouement of this week's Torah reading as he reveals his true identity to them. Joseph had become the Egyptian vizier, like a father to Pharaoh. His brothers tremble before him, fearful of the vengeance he will exact from them for the paternal crimes of his youth. But Joseph does not reproach them with anger or spite, but just the opposite. He says, "Do not be distressed or angry that you sold me here," Joseph says. "For God did send me before you to preserve life. God sent me ahead to ensure your survival on earth and save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance." Joseph's response is noteworthy, not merely because of his willingness to forgive his brothers and let bygones be bygones, choosing the path of magnanimity at the very moment where it would have been so much easier and so much more human to choose otherwise. Joseph's response is remarkable because embedded within those words sit a striking theological statement, a combination of faith, humility, self-awareness, and sense of mission that enabled him to rewrite the story of his life, not just his present stature, but all of the lows that came before that moment, every chapter, every pivot reframed as part of a divinely ordained plan. His descent down to Egypt, his years of imprisonment, even his brother's initial treachery, all of it necessary steps towards a greater good. Yes, this exchange is significant because Joseph reveals his identity to his brothers, but that's only part of it. The real revelation of this scene is one of self-revelation, of Joseph announcing to himself that he has been put on this earth for the purpose of saving lives, those of his brethren and all of Egypt. This is the moment that Joseph gets it, when he understands that the point of his existence isn't about power, and it certainly isn't about some brotherly quarrel that has long since run its course. Here and now, Joseph realizes that the story of his life, past and more importantly future, is to serve a cause greater than he ever imagined possible. It is said that the Hasidic master, Rabbi Israel of Rishon, would pray as follows: "Dear God, I do not ask you to explain to me why the world was created or why the good suffer and the evil prosper. Only please tell me, what am I doing in this world of yours?" This, explains my late teacher, Dr. Byron Sherwin of blessed memory, is the fundamental question of human existence, the query at the core of us all that boils down to one word. And that word is? The word is purpose. Purpose. For what purpose have I been put on this earth? Not we, not humanity as a whole. Interesting as the question of why humankind exists may be, the deeper existential question, the one by which we go to sleep asking and are tasked to use our waking hours answering, is of a far more personal nature. Why me? Why was I put here on this earth at this time? Would the world be any different if that wasn't the case, if I weren't here? Sherwin cites the reflections of Pascal, the 17th century philosopher, French, who wrote, "When I consider the short duration," this is Pascal, "when I consider the short duration of my life, swallowed up in the eternity before and after, the little space which I fill and even can see, engulfed in the infinite spaces of which I am ignorant and which know me not, I am frightened and I am astonished at being here rather than there. For there is no reason why here rather than there, why now rather than then. Who has put me here? By whose order and direction have this space and time been allotted to me? The eternal silence of those infinite spaces," writes Pascal, "frightens me." The question is the same for all of us, no matter what your station in life, prince or pauper, rich or poor. To lack an answer to the question of purpose is to be rendered rudderless, as a driven leaf tormented aimlessly and endlessly. To have an answer, to have a sense of mission in this world, is to have found meaning in the short time allotted to us. It is a balm that soothes the crushing weight of human mortality. As Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." I do believe that each and every one of us has a purpose, a function, a mission here on this earth that only we uniquely can fulfill. Earlier this week, my neighbor and colleague, Rabbi Haskell Lookstein, drew my attention to a beautiful article by the late Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik called Shlichut, a concept that can best be translated as the act of being an emissary. As human beings created in the image of the divine, we carry an awesome responsibility to be God's emissaries, to instantiate the divine will here on earth. The mission is not necessarily explicit. We're not called on by God like Abraham or Moses. Rather, it is a very fact of our being that is our implicit calling. No different than Joseph, who came to understand the particular role he was called to play, so too each one of us. It is a posture of being both audacious and humbling, a summoned life, driven by the belief that each one of us has a vocation, a life driven not by the question of what we want out of this world, but what does this world want or expect out of me? In a language that mirrors Pascal and carries a whiff of the theologian Tillich, Soloveitchik writes, "The fact that a person is born in a specific time and era and place, and not in another era and other circumstance, can only be understood by accepting the concept that every person is an emissary. Nevertheless," explains Soloveitchik, "not everyone will fulfill his or her mission. none of us are ever informed as to what our precise mission is, and granted the gift of free will, the choice of whether we do or don't is ultimately our own to make. To be human, however, is to live with the knowledge that every life does bear the potentiality of purpose, and that a life well lived is lived in pursuit of discovering that purpose, and more importantly, seeking to fulfill it. When it comes to shlichut, of identifying and fulfilling the particular mission of our lives, there are no hard and fast rules. Some people run towards it, some people resist. Joseph embraced his mission when it became apparent to him. Earlier this week, I had the pleasure of hearing from Wendy Kahn, a woman who nearly 25 years ago thought up the idea of Teach for America as her senior thesis in college. Tens of thousands of teachers, students, and school systems forever changed by way of that single and sustained shlichut. Others, like Moses, like Esther, like Jonah, take some convincing along the way. They only accept their life work grudgingly or with great apprehension. There's not necessarily a correlation between the success of any person's shlichut and his or her initial willingness to accept that mission. Some people find their shlichut early, some people find it late. Rabbi Akiva, the greatest scholar of his day, was an illiterate shepherd until he was 40. Theodore Herzl's frenzy of Zionist activity, leadership that would alter the face of Jewish history forever, all happened in the final 10 years of his life. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in his late 40s. Ray Kroc built up McDonald's in his 50s. And Abraham and Sarah were 99 and 90, respectively, when they got around to having children. I often remind myself that one of my heroes, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, didn't write his major work until he was in his mid-50s. He should have negotiated for a sabbatical earlier. One never knows when one will find one's shlichut. Furthermore, continues Soloveitchik, not only might one's mission not be what one thinks it is, it also might not be just one. Every person has multiple missions to fulfill over the course of his or her lifetime. It can be momentary, an unanticipated intervention in another's life, whereby one acquires the world to come in a single instant, or it can be ongoing, like parenting a child over the course of a lifetime. Perhaps most importantly, Soloveitchik writes, there can be no hierarchy to the matter. It is expressly forbidden, even if one is a powerful ruler or a great Torah scholar, to rank one's shlichut as higher than another's. There is no person without his or her hour, as the Mishnah teaches. There is no thing that does not have its place. For if we are all created equally and in the infinite dignity of God, then every person's task is unique to him or her, and thus deserving of respect. As Martin Luther King famously wrote, if a man is called to be a street sweeper, he should sweep streets even as a Michelangelo painted, or a Beethoven composed music, or Shakespeare wrote poetry. He should sweep streets so well that all the hosts of heaven and earth will pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who did his job well. No question, shlichut is an elusive, slippery category that raises as many questions as it resolves. Nevertheless, what we cannot do, what we dare not do, is abdicate our obligation and opportunity to find purpose in this world, going to the grave with our unique song unsung, failing to contribute that one and only thing that only we can contribute, and this world is waiting on us and counting on us to do. The final and most important thing to say about shlichut is that it's an outlook on life that never ceases. Nobody ever sees the mission of his or her life fulfilled in a lifetime, and no person will ever know the full extent of his or her influence. Even Joseph, who believed his purpose to be one thing, well understood that it would not be for generations after that the full impact of his being would be realized. So too with each one of us, to live attentive to the possibilities of every moment, and to live with an awareness that the ripple effect of every moment extends well beyond the horizon of our vision. We must, God-like, muster the courage to be that which we will be, to assert our faith in our humanity and our God, with a self-affirmation that we are indispensable to God's creation. As Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote, "In the eyes of the world I am average, but in my own heart I am of great moment. The challenge I face is how to actualize, how to concretize the quiet eminence of my being." Today and every day, may we all live up to this challenge, actualizing the fullness of our being and living lives that will stand as enduring testimony as to what it means to live a purposeful existence. Amen.